Friends, on the last lesson we discovered the behavior of atomic energy because it is very important for us to find a close parallelism in order to learn the behavior of our feelings, emotions. This is honestly very similar because our feelings are also created by tiny pieces and behave in similar, very similar ways of identical ways in their physical compounds. When energy is compressed and heated, it behaves like a gas, like item, like an explosion. And our feelings behave in the same way because, in the same sense, this gas like item that we simply do not see with our five senses. Now there are devices, there have been around for a long time, great devices that register our feelings. What and how those feelings that behave when you are focused on it doesn't like any type of mystical wisdom anymore. Well, how can infinity be compressed? If the creation comes into, well, this divine creation comes into the body, how can it be limited by anything? After all, this infinity, when this infinite is impeded by the body, and everything that happens to a person in his life, conceptual mind, system, which it is all tied to the need to limit, guarantee, judge, compare, take into verdict. It's all methods of cutting the infinite soul in the some kind of limitation, primitive form. And as a result of this, what happens is what happens at the person explodes, literally explodes. Even if in the outer he is not exploding, on the inside, and all of those diseases that are considered incurable, those that medicine today simply raises its hand and says, we don't know what to do. Yes, and this amount of growing cancer, and this young growth of cancer, and all alike. And it all happens because of the atomic energy as impersonation of feelings person. It's compressed and later in the years pours into dependencies, narcotics, alcoholism, diseases, and other damaged different models that project the violence of the behavior toward oneself. A person's project violence in that way into the world toward behavior on its children, and that it inherits by generations like a relay race because he has no idea what else to do because his whole life he was taught to pressure oneself and pressure others. In turn, using ways of manipulation, ways of pressure, of feeling guilt. Certainly this is layered. That is very important in all manipulative models of a person. A child comes into a system that tells him, can't have that, can't have this, you're supposed to, or required to. So at the start, he comes into this beautiful flower that loves everything and everyone. When a child comes, he smiles to everyone he sees, but gradually he learns not to smile, but be guarded and be more afraid, and then there's hate. And all of that happens in a result that he was taught how it was supposed to be, and how it should be, what is wrong, and what you are expected in life by everyone. When we know that there is no duality, no parallel theories, we can easily understand our children, and we can understand ourselves. In this way, we can know how to build our engagement, how to see the soul of a person of pure love through that person's behavior models, through his disobedience, to see his request to be loved, and in response, not strengthening that pressure of that particular atomic energy of feeling, but see in what way the energy wants to blossom. In that way, we can additionally see in the past to gift him the best resources to a situation so that he can blossom in his indefinite, limitless potential ways in which he came into this world with these things in order to gift others. But before he can see how to give that to our children, it's crucial to do that with oneself because our ways of thinking is set on to judge, to compare, and to take into verdict. And for that and that feeling of guilt and manipulative ourselves and the world, we and those behaviors of ourselves constantly produce these very damaging and broken templates in which we have nothing to give to our children. And talk about some new level of knowledge, about some quantum jump. It's all shaking up the air because it's comparable to worthless pathos that will not give anyone anything until we ourselves go through this important work of the resowing through this damaged behavior, damaged teachings, paradigm that in itself produce themselves. We have come to a tight mark, to the moment when it's necessary to visually figure out what are polarities, dualism, from which that damage and break is born from that person's life. A child comes into the world deeply loving, happy, and shining consciousness because its own universe consciousness. It's that state of being of this dancing, smiling happiness that I would say. And when the child comes into, by this state, loving happiness, he does not know what is plus, what is minus, and doesn't know that he is able to judge someone as a good person or as a bad person. He just loves everyone who gets into this visual perspective. And in turn, that child is possessed with compression, shackles, and that space that he is not in that platform that teaches him to be ashamed, afraid, judge, or judge someone for bad and good, what is right and wrong, how superiority and inferiority. So when the parents repeat over and over, say that it is bad and this is good, little son, come to the father, and little son asks, these are poems are actually monstrous. If you really think about what is good and bad, so what is so bad when the child comes into this happiness trying to love the world? And the bad that happens, it creates the guilt for the mother that needs on every step protect the child. That the little inventor doesn't get harmed does not doom to child's death, its own vulnerable body. And in that way, everything becomes bad in that way, what calls the child to investigate the world. Over time, the child also puts into the system from daycare, when there is a forthgoing of the telling that these strangers that is so bad you can't go there. So when you go into the ground of some kind of that for you, particularly space beyond the line for your particular emotions, the implanted voice that it becomes bad and distantly ashamed, and all of that compressed, of course, of the emotions of guilt. Like how to make a person ashamed of itself. You have to say that for everyone is ashamed, that he is bad on a high level, that everyone is trying to keep distant from him. And in that way, layers in from the early start of age, from newborn age installation, that he has a reason to be ashamed. This happens on such very tiny relation when there is no evidently demonstrations how this looks like truthful blackmail. This is in all minor occurrences. If you're not finished eating your meal, you will be like this and are disobeying me. Then I will abdicate and will not love you. Like in other words, like mom will not love you because this always happens and is absolutely in daycare. The child, strange child, and there's a lot of them. And this unwanted obligation for teachers who are always going into somewhere and looming, like scattering kids. They are very nervous and annoyed. And the main message from the notion that you are supposed to be guilty, that you exist, and that you are a source of irritation. The child will soak in that immediately from the start of life, the fear of the actions done, and be punished or be rejected, or that and this. Of course, this becomes already inside of him. He's already formed in this total feeling of guilt. The feeling of guilt that the feeling of self-denial. So self-denial is compressed as is in itself. How is it? Well, in reality, self-hate is in itself. If you're calling everything by your own words, and then what happens? When a child is told he is bad, he falls into a trap. He falls into a trap of constantly devaluating himself and the belief that this is not right. So since everything that has come from this great infinite, it is lowered into expectations of those primitive insights that you are not neutral. You're not just you. From which from which a person comes into. I am present. You may be bad or good, only that and nothing else. That's it. You could be compared to others. You need to be compared with others to be relatively in a state of judgment. And that way you are put into a pedestal of verdict and judgment. So you're not just existing, you're not just you the way you are irreplaceable. There is no other like you in the world, and another who exists and is also infinite and irreplaceable. No, no one will say that to a child. A child will be taught the idea that if he's going to be bad and judged like a bad kid, then he will be turned away and unloved. And in return, what does he need to do? He falls right into the trap that shows the world that I am. Please, I will cringe and do something that will be, for God's sake, by all means, don't reject me. For God's sake, do not push me away. Do not stop loving me. Open all heaven. I will not live through all that. A child begins to plead when he is devolved even further, and that he is worse and what kind of bad boy you are. Oh God, and the rocks even more in comparison to. Oh God, how scary, how I am punished and how I am deeply guilty. I'm guilty in everything, and the child could not filter through it all from this level of consciousness. He forgot how he came into the world, and he starts from the here. He is going to show harder to improve that he is good. And in that way, the more others devalue me, the more I teach the compressed energy to compensate through what? Through striving for superiority. So I want to prove to you that I am not the destructive as you said to me from birth. I will now prove to you. Open, what will I prove on? Since I was only taught to compare, I was told either you or Vasi Pumpkin, yeah? If you're not going to be better than him, then you will be worse than you. There's no other alternative. That you are irreplaceable, and Basic Pumpkin is irreplaceable will never be said by anyone because then we lose the way of controlling you. Manipulative you, such as like a horse who needs reins, so that you could be a puppet on strings of a socium on or a system, because we have been raised that way and we are taught that and are passing that on to you and tell you that if you're not going to strive to prove yourself, then you're going to be this worthless. So this feeling will always be exactly proportional to a feeling of excellence. So if I'm feeling myself very, very worthless, like deeply compressed consciousness, then I will strive to come and raise above another that is exactly comparison proportion, so that the feeling of inadequateness, because this is polarities, and polarities are a pendulum that again is in a physical rule and swing only based on that principle. So that is it. I end up in this scary, very, very scary trap of my own consciousness when there is no need for anyone to blackmail, manipulate me, and that if you're not going to be this good, not going to be proven a standard of goodness, the kind that we force you to be, then you will be bad. Then I myself, out of fear, will run to prove that I'm good since I was taught to compare, and in this way judge myself as compared to someone else. Then I will strive to be better than the other person. It will pleasure me that I am better than him. If I am well judge myself as worse than him, then I will hate the person and I will feel flawed in comparison to him, and so on. So in that sense, I will compare myself with someone and at the same time feel either pleasure and authority about it or feel worse and hate and despise, envy, and the feeling of destruction. It becomes as if I cannot love anything. All that used to be here when I was unjudged, that does not exist anymore. Child does not remember who he was. Persons deeply forget, and this thin layer, horizontally primitive consciousness that is in the trap that he ends up in is the social life. This is all that exists in every unwarily conscious person. So to be aware and remember who you are, you need to rise and look above, and that you are in a cage of that consciousness, that you are inside of it. And your consciousness is not just what you see from above. Your thoughts are formed there, and that you will consciously recognize in a 1-2 will stop playing this game. Your body as is always identifies with this broken consciousness, deformed. And that is why all broken connections, all of these cells, is all of this sick body. Well, in order to born a new body, that is a new body, that this is a vertical straight, this is for youth, for clarity, so that vertically exists a body that is healthy, happy, loving body, but not the one who had come from the very beginning. To this very point, this was the level of animal consciousness. Neutral, when a person is just happy and himself shines outward energy, but does not realize that. And that way, this is not compared as the same as a spiritual awaken. This is a wonderful consciousness, free from pain, but it needs this layer. In order to go through this layer, this pathway, there must come awareness. In this way, the cycle is locked. This layer outlived itself, and the game of dualism, figuring out of where the ocean of pain is from, why inside your core in full strength this pain screams. You know why it screams. That's it. And this awareness. And this is now you need to start to rebuild all of yourselves. These many walkable old traditions, many years, yes, repeating youngster behavior, models and sceneries that on a physical level and clearly reproduce itself. The wandering thoughts that on a physical layer, the wandering thoughts, the very strictly locked in these framed thoughts of comparison and judgment. You're not able to just jump in, just in one action, even though you want. And you want to see from above this deformed structure, that force that creates this pain and struggle. This is the struggle that is in the chest of a person's heart chakra that is compressed. You can't jump out that quickly and say, you have accepted this decision to be aware right now, and this awareness. You can't do that. This will dissolve and will stop playing for me this role and become infinite sign that's in this confliction between being destructive and importantly valued, and that this will no longer exist, and this for uselessly and senselessly, because there is nothing and there is no one for you to prove, because if you do not feel yourself flawed, there is no use to show your importance or significance. Yes, this will be a lot deeper and a very hard work in the process to restructure the entire nervous system and all consciousness that is created for the entire body, because you cannot at all have any compete. Well, if truthfully to look from this level, then you simply cannot compete. Within this one inner movement, just because you want to change, it is impossible, because you are competing with everyone around all the time, always, and with yourself from yesterday. You compete with any of your friends and with your lover. You compete without interruption. Your whole life, the processing of thought of this primitive thinking is conducted from competition, because comparison is competition. Comparison is opposition verdict. Comparing is the strive for superiority and always achieving goals. This is pro-comparison. And in return, deprives a person of love, infinite love, because that is well, a person is not to be able to love if he is comparing himself with someone and think that you are worthless, or comparing yourself with someone else to think that the other person is worthless. On some back scene, you will always do that, even when you think that I'm in love. So because you are in a higher intention, doesn't stand past that to love, well, like, you want to love. Every particle strives for love. And what else? What else can you do? You are frankly this consciousness, and no matter in what comparison, what else can you want in life other than to love? Why does it happen that you are feeling either worth as trash, or you feel yourself superiority? And from that, you feel high from the test authority over someone else, someone who is the same as you, because you do not know how to love, you forget. But at this level, you have never also disappeared from. And then our next lesson, we'll figure out what to do next.